Good morning, everybody. Welcome everyone to this innovation session of the World Energy Week. We are delighted to have you all connected from around the world. Before we start, a few words on SET. As you are aware, the World Energy Council, together with German Energy Agency, DINA, has joined forces a few years ago to bring to life the Startup Energy Transition Platform, SET. This is a global platform comprised of SET award and a growing global network. So each year, we publish a SET 100 list of the top 100 most innovative and promising startups in the world. So just to remind that later this month, we will announce the winners 2020 during the launch of the 2021 SET edition. But for today we will talk about innovation ecosystems. How do we create the environment fertile, energetic, selective, efficient to allow new ideas to emerge? What are the roles and responsibility of each part of this complex system? What makes a region more attractive and fertile? We will hear the perspective of startups, investors, university, leading companies, and government agencies. Next slide. We will focus on difficulties, success. Next slide. Practical fact of life. And we will have the privilege to have with us Robert Andren, Director General of the Swedish Energy Agency, Isaac Ruttenberg from Strathmore in Kenya. We will open the conversation both with fire starters comments. Then we will have the presentation of Oscar from Colombia and Matthew from India. Both will talk about their two companies. They are the founders and they are making up to the SET 100 list this year. Good luck for this. Finally, we will have two commentators, Gina Domaning, Managing Partner at Emerald Venture, and Richard Lancaster, CEO of CLP of Hong Kong, that will comment and participate to the discussion at the end. Both are also, on top of being leaders of their organization, they are also leaders in the stream innovation of the World Energy Council. So with this impressive, diverse global group, we will certainly learn a lot. And for now, I will give the floor to Robert for the first presentation. Robert, this is your show now.
Thank you so much, Philip. And ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends of innovation, it's very good to meet you digitally in these troublesome times. Yeah. We all realize that we are actually in the middle of some kind of a global crisis on the corona. But there are also possibilities to seize in this kind of crisis. And I think that one thing we should realize and take along with us is the fact that we have seen an enormous forcefulness among governments, private businesses, also individuals to deal with this, to quickly adapt and to adjust and try to face the crisis in a very efficient way around the whole world, so to say. And we should take that forcefulness with us into the other huge global crisis that we are facing, which is perhaps even more severe, and that is the climate challenge we are facing. So having said that, Sweden, Europe's 5th largest country, but only 10 million people. So we're a small country and at the same time a huge country, and that is one of our advantages, I would say, when it comes to the issue of clean energy transition. This Monday we had a very good news because Bombardier announced that they would base their Global Innovation Center for Railway and E-Mobility in Sweden. And that is good news every day of the week when it's announced, but even more so looking at what we're facing now with the corona crisis. And the reason for Bombardier to choose Sweden is, and I'm quoting, Sweden is the ideal location to develop next generation energy efficient electric propulsion systems to enable clean transportation in the rail and automotive sectors. We are proud to build on our extensive e-mobility expertise to provide the Swedish industrial ecosystem with a leading fast-paced innovation environment that is unique. And I think that this is shows why Sweden can actually lead the way, why we are an innovative country, and the possibilities that we actually can give to innovators, companies that want to spearhead the clean energy transition. Next slide, please. The reason I think is, first of all, that the political system in Sweden is basically a sustainable political leadership. We are very dedicated to the sustainable development goals. We are very dedicated to the whole climate combat challenge that we are facing. We have also shown that there are political understanding of the fact that environmental progress and environmental care and climate considerations goes well hand in hand with economic and social benefits. And I think that this makes us and Sweden a good platform for developing new sustainable innovations and products and systems alike. We also have from the start, more or less a fossil-free energy system, or at least electric system. We still have our challenges with the transportation. That is why it's even more important and good news that Bombardier are establishing the transportation side of the business in Sweden. Now, there are other reasons that I think that one shouldn't underestimate the importance of why Sweden actually attracts a lot of investments at the moment when it comes to innovation in the energy sector. One is that we are actually we have unlocked the potential of the whole population, and we have worked very hard with gender equality. And I think that this is one key component in why we are where we are and why we attract people and companies from other parts of the world. And we also have a possibility of having a work-life balanced with combining the private parts, family care and family children, should we say, caring systems as well, which makes it easier for people to work in Sweden, I think. And daycare costs are subsidized by the government, for instance. And we have parental leave that is also a part of keeping competencies, because you can, as I said, balance your private life with your professional life in a very positive manner. And I think that we also should understand that these are important parts in creating some kind of a security and feeling of security for people, that they can become even more creative, more innovative. We have also worked very hard with our school system to focus on creativity and innovation skills. Instead of just learning the facts, it's about using the facts for tomorrow's business. So that is also one of the reasons why I think a lot of companies are looking at Sweden as the way forward. And here the government has been very, very proactive and very, very offensive, I would say. Next slide, please. I also think that you could then say, okay, has this had any, is this true? Has this had any real evidence in working all of the things that I've talked about at the moment? Yes, it has. And I think Sweden has been ranked one of the world's leading innovative nations for a number of years now, particularly when it comes to green innovations. And as you can see, we're on top level in most of the innovation indexes that we can see and that rate countries around the world. And that is something that shows that we are, the government and the public decisions and the public network on both the social aspects, the education, innovation arena, and also when it comes to the decisions taken when it comes to environmental considerations, has been working in our favor. And this, I think, speaks for us to become a leading nation also in the long run, despite being a small one. And the last slide, please. I also think that what we are showing is that we are believing a lot in cooperation and co-creation, working within the global and international forums as much as possible. And when it comes to mission innovation, for instance, which is the global innovative process from Paris Agreement, we have done a lot of front-running work together with other countries, because that's the way to do it, is by cooperation. We are also a country that are heavily dependent on cross-border cooperation and co-creation as a free trading dependent nation. And I think that this actually also creates a very innovative climate in our countries, both on the local level, but also on the national level. And to just round off, I think that being a Swede to the core, I follow, as many other Swedes are following, the guidelines that say, I take my hat off for the achievements we've done so far, but I take off my coat and roll up my sleeves for the work ahead of us. And I think that's the spirit you face in Sweden. That's why we are a leading innovative country. Thank you so much, and welcome to Sweden.
Thank you very much, Robert. It was quite interesting, and I'm sorry you have to leave, but we thank you for your time with us. And really, what I am taking from your contribution is all this integration and collaboration that you are organizing, first inside your own society, and as you said, taking the whole power of your society with equality, starting at the school level with the mind of creativeness, and finally collaborating internationally. And this was really helpful. Thank you very much, and have a nice day. Thank you. So after
bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. After Robert, I will now give the floor to Isaac from Kenya, Nairobi, that will give us some different perspective. Isaac, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philippe. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you to the organizers. And I am very happy to be a part of this. My name is Isaac Ruttenberg. I am the director of the Center for Intellectual Property and Information Technology Law, which is a research think tank at Strathmore University in Nairobi, although I'm currently coming to you from the coast, the Kenyan coast. I run it was a startup. I suppose it's 8 years old, so no longer a startup, but it's a startup think tank, if you will. We study startups, and we have various interactions with startups, which include an intellectual property clinic, a legal clinic for intellectual property issues that are facing the startups in Kenya and also in the East African region. So I've interacted a lot with startups, and I've come across many stories, many common issues that startups face, and I'm sure that this is true in many other parts of the world. From our interactions with colleagues, I can say that many of the challenges are the same. So the solutions might be different, but we can at least discuss some of the issues. And so I won't talk about each of these points. Actually, I'm going to go a little bit off script and just sort of talk more about stories, actually, if you will. So one of the challenges that many startups face that we've encountered are collaboration agreements, or just agreements in general. I should mention I'm a lawyer as well, although my background is first background is in chemistry. I became a patent lawyer and now come at this from more of a legal perspective. So when I say agreements, I'm talking about, and this is the last point on the slide here, I'm talking about things such as joint research agreements and also funding agreements. I know we have funding agencies here with us today. So that often can get people into trouble in various ways. So agreements always go very well until they don't. And there are very many reasons why an agreement might not go well. But often the trigger for agreement not going well is success, because when the stakes are low, people are favorable to just about anything. But when the stakes become high, they start to become possessive, or collaboration becomes more difficult. So if the original agreement that's in place is not sufficient to deal with the circumstances that come about, particularly as the stakes get higher and higher, we see these agreements tend to break down pretty rapidly. One example I'll give is actually related to knockoff imitators, another point on the slide there. I worked with a biogas company, startup company here, that was collaborating with a foreign company. The foreign company was providing some funding, a bit of funding, and was promising to help the company take their biogas digester to a global market. But once the digester was completed and showed that it was very effective and low cost and very ideal for smallholder farmers, the collaborator decided that they were going to just go on their own, start producing the device themselves, and sort of essentially took the technology on their own. And so the individual, the startup company, had to then become a competitor to the agency that was, or the other organization that was originally there to purportedly to help them. So those sorts of things could be dealt with in the original contract of or agreement of their collaboration, but oftentimes they're not, and people go into these. Of course, money is scarce in the beginning, so you don't have money to pay for a lawyer, you don't have money to pay for a proper agreement, or you don't think about it, and so oftentimes, these things are not in place from the very beginning, which is a big problem. I'll cover two other points. One is a very good resource that is often overlooked is the university itself. So I come from a university. We have research centers within the university. We have a research center devoted entirely to energy, the Strathmore Energy Research Center, and many different innovations coming out of that. I know that they are very interested and eager to work with startup companies, particularly, well, not particularly, but including foreign companies that come in with technologies. Oftentimes a foreign company will be will be willing to work with their university from their own home country, but ignores or forgets or doesn't have the right contacts with local universities, which may be in a better position to help that company successfully roll out their product, successfully integrate it into the local context. So I would say a good idea is to contact your local universities, whether private or public. I know that the universities in Nairobi or in Kenya in general, the public universities have very large research funding budgets, although that's not always what the news says, or that's not what you always hear. They often do, but you do have to sort of look deeper than. Well, oftentimes it involves getting a one-on-one relationship with the professors actually doing the research. There are several universities that I've worked with that have professors doing innovations in the energy area specifically, and they're eager to work with other people, but nobody ever approaches them directly. People go through or try and approach the university in other ways. So oftentimes that's more challenging, and it may be better to do some research of your own to find out which professors are doing work in a particular area. The final point I have before I turn it back over to Philippe is the law. Sometimes the law has ways of helping startups, and in fact, just this month, a senator in Nairobi introduced into our parliament, a startup bill, a legal instrument that they are hoping to pass through parliament that would specifically help startup companies. And they're looking for ways to improve that. We're going to help them out with that. But as in our research, we discovered these things are actually not uncommon. There are other examples of this, and I encourage you to check the local laws and wherever you are to see if there is a specific bill or a act. If there's a specific agency, often there's an agency. In fact, there are several in Kenya, so that are specifically designed to assist startups with various issues, whether those be obtaining seed funding or helping them with intellectual property issues, or navigate regulatory frameworks, which can be very complicated. So I encourage you to check for that. It's oftentimes not publicized well, but it might be there for you. So with that, I will turn it back over to Philippe, and I'll be around for questions after the session or during the session.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac. And you brought a very interesting perspective and light on the legal environments that can exist, or perhaps we are not aware enough. And this is certainly this sentence, everything goes well till it goes wrong, is certainly a good advice for now the two startups that will take the floor. First, then Matthews from distributed energy for distributed energy from India. Matthews, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philippe. That's very kind of you. And hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Mazvancheri, and I'm from a company called Distributed Energy. We are a renewable energy aggregator based in India, and we work in India and East Africa. I want to start off with a statistic, which is that the Indian government has set its sights on having 175 gigawatts of non-hydro renewables by 2022. This is 60 gigawatts of onshore wind, 60 gigawatts of utility scale solar, and 5 gigawatts of small hydro, 10 gigawatts of bioenergy, and 40 gigawatts of rooftop solar. Where we stand right now is the total capacity till date is about 60 gigawatts today. So there's a huge gap, which is evident in this sort of renewables target. Next slide. And the problem with the reason why you have this issue is that there are some key challenges. I'd say the three key challenges that we can see to this is that you have large utility scale projects which get done, but India is a vast country and has a large rural hinterland, and the developers ignore smaller scale projects. The associated problem is that access to capital for smaller scale projects is almost impossible. Even where funds have been allocated specifically for this, banks are remarkably hesitant to release funds for these projects. So it's a bit of a problem. I mean, it's almost impossible to finance these projects going on further. So you have a very small cluster of utility scale projects, the rooftop projects and other small projects don't get financed. Policy is another issue. So there is a lot of very favorable policy dictated as a very admirable goal, but basically there's a lot of challenges from the sort of, the states. India as a federal state, and as sort of the federal state itself and the sort of unitary components of the state, the local regional governments, they have a bit of a tussle on this. And a case in point, which I'll show, is gross metering, which is a new policy which has been implemented in the state of Karnataka in India. So this holds back, the inconsistency of policy holds back the sort of movement of renewable energy going on further. And the last one I would say is the availability of the asset class. Currently the asset class is controlled or sort of mainly financed by large institutional investors. There's almost a lack of awareness among sort of retail investors, small investors, who really are the bulk of the people who could sort of fuel this transition going on forward. And that sort of means that you have very narrow focus on the utility scale market and less on the sort of renewables, so the rooftop market and the smaller scale projects that could be taken forward. Next slide. So this is the situation that I'm going to highlight with the gross metering. So when you have basically two aspects of how people could be rewarded, and one is net metering, where you basically get the retail price that you're supposed to get, and the other is gross metering, where a fiat price is given back to the generator. And in this case, basically what's happened is that we were in advanced discussions with a prominent contract manufacturer. Suddenly gross metering was introduced and the project size plummeted from 950 kilowatts to about 650 kilowatts. That's because you can no longer feed into the grid. So the incentive to do that extra 300 kilowatts just disappeared, basically. You can see the CO2 emissions that were possible to reduce went down from 1,387 tons to 949 tons. And the reason for that was that you had the grid will purchase power for 3.07 rupees, and then it will give it back to you for 7.6 rupees. So the attractiveness of the project and net savings realized just went down. So the state has effectively gone into a situation where investment into smaller projects is going to be severely limited because of this policy. This also has resulted in a situation where there's a legal challenge currently to this policy. So all this has resulted in policy uncertainty and in, the consequent sort of reduction in attractiveness to the general public. Next slide, please. So what we do is we are a renewable aggregator. We use technology to bring forward through 4 levers, which I'll come to in the next bit. But our main intention is, just as Robert discussed earlier, co-creation. So we want to create an environment that is suitable and that fosters renewable energy, especially in the sort of small and medium sector going on forward. So we want to sort of encourage the policy that would facilitate this transition, bring forward a mass movement which would enable renewable energy to sort of progress forward seamlessly. Next slide, please. And how we do this is, like I said, 4 levers. First of all, we've standardized the output that we give to people. So we have got structured processes. We've got standards for all the equipment that we procure, give to the vendors that we use. To the investors, we show a standardized input and output scenario. So that means that people have a clear and consistent expectation from us in regards to the outputs and inputs that we're using. Yeah. We use SCADA and IoT to track the process from end to end. So there's a transparency for both investors and transparency for both the buyers of renewable energy. So if you invest in this, you see what's being generated on a consistent basis. If you're a buyer of renewable energy, you see what's being given to you going on. And there are the investment in technology, especially, is in sort of demand side management to make sure that the energy generated at the peak of the solar curve is utilized most efficiently, fault detection, so that the solar platform and the renewables that we are using are maximized. There's much less downtime, and that investors are able to sort of see what is being generated and how it is being used for maximum effect. And the last one is, I think, aligning investments with what your values are. So I came onto this because I believe that renewable energy is a purpose-driven investment. So I think it's something that you need to sign up to, because we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is an imperative. I belong to the state of Kerala, where we had floods 3 times in the last 3 years, and I think that's due to climate change, regardless of what the deniers say. And I think that we need to make this happen. This is something that is not a sort of nice to have. It's something that we need to make happen, and people need to align their values to it. And what we want to do is we want to offer people a chance to put their money where their mouth is and sort of align their values to their investments. So as my co-founders say, power to the people. That's what we are all about. And I'll hand over back to Felipe.
Thank you.
For his.
Thank you very much, Matthew. It was really interesting, and I take your point. So it's that startups, this is a kind of Matthew paradox, I will say now. The startups that are very often troublemakers need stability of rules and need a certain stability of standards so they can survive to their own trouble that they are creating. So I think this is a really interesting paradox. Thank you. And your point on purpose also, I will come back on that in the conclusion, is quite important. Thank you. Thank you. So I will now give the floor to Oscar from Colombia. He's the founder of Uptime Analytics. Oscar, you have the floor.
Thanks, Philippe. Thank you very much. I want to begin to thanks again to the World Energy Council for the invitation to this panel, to this amazing panel with all of the colleagues here as well. I'm Oscar. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Uptime Analytics, and we're here to present what are the challenges that we as a startup in Colombia in LATAM have been having in the past years. And I would like to present as well how we have solved them and how we have attacked them with certain things that I will present in the next slide. So the first thing is that I was just thinking around how was the best way to present the challenges, and I created this slide and I called it Our Road to Transforming into a Disruptive, Innovative Startup, because I believe that challenges are always there for us entrepreneurs, and startups, they have a life cycle, you know, and in each stage of the life cycle, you have different challenges. In Uptime Analytics, we previously have another name before Uptime, and we were a consulting company. That was years ago, and in which we had to understand what were the needs that our market had, and we began to sell Industry 4.0 technology like 3 or 4 years ago. We began to sell as well AI 4 years ago, and market didn't understand the need. So there's one of the first challenges as a startup that we were facing is time to market, you know. So the first thing you as a startup need to do is, hey, how do I try to educate the market to see that this new technology can help benefit? So we were there at the first stage of the Industry 4.0 technology, and that was one of our first challenges that we as a startup had. After we created our first MVP, next, Chris, please. Then our minimum viable product with our technology, then we had another uncertainty that was, hey, where can I pilot this technology? Which corporation is going to open the door to try this? And this is a very frequent thing in LATAM, because sometimes startups, I think it's changing over time, but sometimes they don't still believe that we are a solution for big corporations, and I'm gonna say that that's a big challenge here, because the corporations, they have the money, they have the resources, they have the problems. Of sometimes, like if we talk about energy, we know that industry consumes more than 50% of the energy worldwide. So we are a startup that we help industry save consumption. So how can we make corporations to facilitate the creation of pilots to demonstrate technology? So that was a very interesting stage in a couple of years ago we had. and that was another challenge we had after that. Like a startup needs to find money because you have an MVP, you need to go and see where to find resources to like grow your startup, demonstrate that that was not just luck, and you have a good technology just to replicate what you did. So so access to finance, it's as well complicated in LATAM countries. It's improving more and more. But that's another challenge that we face as a startup. Then after finding a first round of angel investment, then you are ready to go to the next stage. And you want to upgrade your technology because you want to grow your technology, you want to control more your technology, you want to make it prettier, you want to make it more functional, and you need to find talent for that. So that's another challenge, to go to the market and find the right people to create the right stuff for the right customer. So you can see that as you move from stage to stage in your road to being an interesting startup, you have different challenges and different people that can help you solve these challenges. And then at the end, once you have your technology upgraded, you need to grow, right? And when you grow, you encounter other challenges such as, hey, what's a SaaS business model, software as a service? Do we have that regulated in Colombia? And you have other challenges that come into place. But I don't think this is a problem from entrepreneurs. I think that entrepreneurs, they need to believe that barriers and challenges are always going to be there, and thanks to that, we can be more innovative, and we can create other solutions that can surpass all of these challenges, and that's always going to be there. What I really believe is that government, big corporations, and academia and startups, they need to work together in creating a friendly environment so that every time a startup goes through these stages, it could be smoother and not hard, because many of the startups, they stay in one of these stages because they cannot even, for example, find investment or prove their technology in a corporation or any other challenges that I present here. So this is the first slide I wanted to begin with. I do believe that startups are changing the world, and I'm a passionate entrepreneur. And now I want to explain what we do at Uptime Analytics. In Uptime,
Oscar, can you make it a little shorter for this explanation, because we are running out of time? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Philippe. In Uptime, we optimize energy consuming assets. We understand, as I said, that industry has a big role in energy consumption. So what we do is we connect to the big data that machines generate. We detect opportunities of savings. We detect failures, and then we impact companies by giving them decision-making models through our proprietary technology. And at the end, the value they get is 5 to 13% in energy savings. They get more availability, more efficient process, and we reduce their operational cost. And we're a company based in Bogota and Medellin, Colombia. And thank you very much for the space, Philippe.
Okay.
Take it back to you.
Thank you very much, Oscar. I was really interested by your road to market and the succession of challenges that you have to go through. Now it will be a perfect transition for Gina, because Gina, you have this experience all around the world. You have a very privileged position of the observation of all these experiments. I'm sure that you have recognized a lot of cases that you already know in your activity. So please react. What is your purpose? What is the role of the finance world in this complex world? And can you give us your your look on these experiences.
Sure. Thank you very much, Philippe. And first, I want to say I think it's fantastic that WEC is putting such an importance on innovation and including the startups in their events and the collaboration with Dana. So I'm happy to see that WEC is taking an active role in improving the ecosystem. And we are a venture capital firm, have been investing in industrial technologies, particularly in energy, for the last 20 years. And I'll say, open globally, but actually mostly investing in North America, Europe, and Israel for a lot of the reasons which previous speakers have talked to. And I think if I could summarize what everybody has been talking about or highlighting different elements of the ecosystem. And I think each region, even each industry, needs to recognize where are their strengths and weaknesses within the ecosystem and how can they actually improve it. And if I just kind of touch on a few, I mean, Robert and Oscar both talked about the talent pool. Obviously, not every country has the same importance or the same availability of those resources. I think Isaac mentioned the support for startups. Super important. A lot of people talk about, just the innovation on its own or the money, but a lot of times, what's missing is actually the support for those startups in those early phases. Obviously, regulatory stability that Matthew brought up, super important. It will definitely keep away the VCs if there's not regulatory stability. Early technology adopters, which Oscar mentioned, I'm going to leave that to Richard because it's really the role of the corporates, and we try to facilitate that. But where there are innovative startups with strong value propositions and have business models that work, that will attract the VCs, right? But we still need an environment where those startups will be successful. And I think that, many of the aspects were mentioned today. And I think that, bringing the venture capital firms in, having the venture capital firms also point out why they are not investing in certain technologies, which maybe need to be de-risked a bit more before the VCs come in, or other areas where government and private sector can actually help to make it let's say, a more attractive environment for the startups to be successful. And then the VCs will come.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Jean. This I will, if you don't mind, we will come back on this after, because I'm really interested in digging into this issue of when the VC don't come, as you said. Is it because it's too risky, or is it because the opportunity is not clear enough, or is it the same, or is it both? Because we talk a lot about risk, but sometimes we forget of the reality of the service that this startup, between brackets, is bringing to the market. So, as you said, I think it will be time now to give the floor to Richard, that will give a corporate view on all what we have seen now. As sometimes some people much more famous than me said, can elephant dance? Is size a problem for startup and creativity, or is size an advantage? In some presentation, we have seen that at a certain point of time in the development of startup, you need size, you need money, you need access to market and capability, and this is what CLP could bring into the party. So, Richard, this is you have the floor.
Thank you, Philippe, and thank you also for those fascinating presentations, and a number of very interesting points that were drawn out during those presentations. Yep. And Philippe, you quite rightly bring out the benefit of large corporates in terms of the scale that they offer. And scale is important for a number of reasons. We heard in the example Matthew brought up in India, just how vulnerable a startup is to regulatory change. Yeah. And utilities understand that completely. This is the biggest risk that utility businesses face is regulatory change. And one way of addressing regulatory change is by acquiring scale. If you are of such a size and such an importance that a regulatory change will affect your business and therefore affect millions of customers, then governments and regulators have to stop and think twice before they introduce those changes. So scale brings a number of benefits in managing risk as well as making creating business opportunities. And I'd like to draw on the point that Isaac raised about collaboration as well. Utilities and startups haven't necessarily seen each other as collaborative partners in the past. I can recall a meeting I had with the CEO of what is now a major wind turbine manufacturer, a global company. And this is back in 2005, 2006, where he came to me and said that his business had always viewed utilities as the enemy. And he now sees that utilities are the future of his business. And that epiphany that he had was a recognition that as a startup, you're not really going to be successful if you're fighting the utility or trying to find a way around the utility. You are far more successful if you can work with the utility. And therefore, collaboration should always be first and foremost in a startup's mind. Now, can an elephant dance? Of course, an elephant can dance. An elephant may never be a world-class ballerina, but they can very much learn to dance, and it is a learning exercise. CLP has been working with startups for a number of years. When we first looked at collaboration with startups, we would bring a collaborative agreement to the table, and it might have been a 20-page document. A startup would come along thinking this was maybe a one-page document. When we talked about pilot schemes as a utility, we talked about timeframes in terms of months. The startups were talking about in terms of weeks. And so there was a mutual learning exercise. We had to learn how to work with each other. And I think that collaboration is vitally important. Startups will be far more successful if they can learn to collaborate, but equally utilities will be much more secure in their business models and have stronger business as well if they learn to collaborate as well.
Okay, thank you, Richard. So this is a perfect transition to the conversation now, and so we will start debating between us all the aspects that we have seen, and I will start with this one, which is the collaboration between major players and startup. And I am seeing that Oscar will like to launch the conversation on this point after Richard just talked. So please, Oscar, please comment. Let's try to keep a short, not too long answer, so we have plenty of subject to debate. So please, Oscar.
Thanks, Philippe. I do believe that the collaboration needs to be done. We in Colombia, we have worked with two corporate accelerators, and they have given us the opportunity to demonstrate technology. And it's when we have that opportunity that we can demonstrate that startups can really solve a real life problem. So I believe what Richard was saying, that in CLP they open the doors to a startup is the best way of innovating and creating new solutions for corporations. I always say that that startups, they are flexible, they move fast, they do pilots, as Richard was saying, in weeks. Corporations, they are more bureaucratic, and they are like a little bit behind startups in terms of moving fast, and then you have government way behind. So I think that the best way to create friendly environmental ecosystems, innovation ecosystems, is when the three of them, they are integrated together and they work as a one thing. to create the government policies so that the solutions that startups are creating for corporations or any other actor can work in a good way, in a cost efficient way. So I do believe that the match between corporate and startup, it's a win-win thing that of course needs to be treated in a special way, and with as Isaac was saying, with the regulatory aspects, so that the corporate cannot take advantage of the startup, because we as a startup has less how do you say negotiations skills and negotiation muscle. That would be my opinion on that.
Thank you. Any reaction on this? And if not, I would also would like to widen this. You always mention time. All of you have mentioned time or perception of time. Can we say that this is an area where startup, big corporation, financial market, and government have different perception? Can you comment on that, Gina? Because I know that on time and also on perception of performance and stability of prevision, sometimes you have a different opinion.
Yeah, sure. No, and I think, from the venture capital point of view, people have to understand, in any discussion or negotiation with somebody, you need to understand your counterpart and where they're coming from, right? Venture capital funds traditionally are structured in a particular way. They've got, let's say, on average 5 years to get out of an investment. So venture capital funds take money from their investors, they invest in startups, those startups need to somehow be sold or IPO'd, and then that money needs to go back to the investors, right? So there is typically a certain pressure, time pressure. The startups in industrial technology just simply take longer to get to that maturity phase compared to other areas of, let's say, consumer internet type of startups, right? And I think that all the parties that were mentioned need to recognize that, right? The government needs to understand what they can reasonably expect as far as external financing to come in and to de-risk these technologies. The corporates, I think, understand very well, probably better than anyone, how long it actually takes to develop these technologies and to bring it really to a commercially viable product. So I think that there are those different time elements involved. But some things that were mentioned, I would say, if startups can attract investors who have those connections to the corporates, because unfortunately, not all the corporates in the world or the utilities in the world are like the CLPs, who are very proactive and very dynamic, right? But a specialized investor in that sector will know who are the early adopters, right? And then they'll be able to make those the matches, and they'll also be able to help the company to structure, these agreements, bring in the right legal counsel. And so I think that people need to see the venture capital firms not just as a source of money, because the right ones should be able to help the startups be successful, right?
That's an important point. How do you reconcile venture capitalism or pure finance players and the incubator that sometimes are inside big corporation? That big corporation is a kind of recognition that they need a different instrument or a different vehicle to attract startup than their big organization. So how do you reconcile this? And this is a question for Richard and you in reality. You are mute, Richard. Oh.
Maybe I should go ahead and start while Richard is, and I can stop. So I think one element. So Emerald is a little bit different in that all of our investors are actually major corporations, right? And they're looking to invest in our fund obviously they want to have some financial return, but that's not the main objective. The main objective is actually strategic return. So to build these alliances, and we try to play that role of matching those corporates who want to pilot technologies, who have an open innovation culture with the right startups in the most efficient way. And I see Richard is now unmuted, so I'll hand it over to him.
Apologies, my technical inabilities there. Yes, one other point I'd like to bring out is working individually with utilities can be quite daunting for a startup, and each utility has a particular market. It may have a particular business model, a particular focus. But COP's experience has been that working with a consortium of like-minded utilities can be a far more approachable way for startups, and gives the utilities the benefit of sharing resources and sharing expertise. So it does shorten the timescales. If you look at any large utility, one of the constraints that you'll always find is the human resources, not necessarily the financial resources. The people that you have that have the technical expertise to work on a particular problem. In any utility, there'll be a handful of those people. And so there's a limit to how many pilot programs you can run at any one time. But if you join forces with other utilities, there's a lot more ground that you can cover. You can share those resources, and you can usually get a better fit between a startup and the utility. So I would see that platforms such as what Emerald Ventures is looking at, other examples are free electrons, where you can bring these consortia together. It does shorten the timescale, makes it easier for startups to work with the utilities, and generally provides a much more efficient use of everyone's time and resources.
That's a very good point. And you also are touching an area which is sometimes touchy, which is not in the field of utility, but I would say in the field of technological manufacturer, etc. Sometimes this is not in the best interest of the large corporation to have some startup successful. And it happens that not often that startups are in reality not being helped by the big corporation that acquire or so-called help the startup. So this is also an area where an alliance of a big corporation or a groupment like Emerald can give more safety to the startup, I will say.
I think that's a good point, Philippe. And the way I look at startups in the energy sector, it's not that electricity as a product is being replaced, and it's not that the business model is necessarily being thrown out and replaced with something new. It is evolving, it's changing, the way customers use electricity is changing, the way we produce it is changing, but the fundamental business models are still there. And for a utility, you can embrace innovation and move with the times, in which case you're increasing your chance of success, or you can put your head in the sand and hope that it all goes away, in which case I think that's a recipe for disaster. So I think in the case of the energy sector, given the scale of the problem that we face in decarbonization, and given the opportunities that are available with innovation and technology, to me, it's a no-brainer that utilities should be embracing innovation and should be forward-thinking.
Yeah, there is a question from Angela, our boss. So we have to answer the question of Angela anyway. And she's asking something that we have not touched yet, which you are just touching, which is, okay, electricity is fine, but are we seeing already some will or some startup in the new area of electricity, which is the clean heat or the clean molecules? Or in a nutshell, is an ecosystem able to move toward a future of its own corporation? Have you seen this? This is more a question for Oscar, Gina, or have you seen a startup in? Yes, Gina.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've seen startups. The past 20 years. You always find the technical community, the scientific community working on particular problems. Sometimes, regardless of whether there's a market need for it or not, right? And I think that what's key is to recognize when are we getting to that tipping point where the market is actually going to pull these innovations through to commercialization, right? And I think that, Angela mentioned green molecules, definitely. I mean, right now, if I think about how we were talking 20 years ago or even 10 years ago about this, we're thinking, nobody cares, nobody wants it, the market isn't interested. And now we have to, and that's important that we have to rethink our assumptions. We have to stay on top of the trends, see which one of the big elephants is actually starting to move, because those are the customers, right? Those are the partners. Those are the ones who will make those startups successful in the end of the day. So I definitely would say that we've always seen the innovation. Obviously, once there's a market pull, we'll see more innovation. But that, that it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg problem, right? But I think we're at a tipping point. I really do.
Okay. No, that's also a good point that we could address all together, which is the question of success. So what if you have to? We always talk about barriers, about failures. So let's talk about success now a little. So if you have to choose one or two facts that will mean success with a higher percentage of chance that the normal failure rate of this activity, what will you choose? For me, if I have to start, I will say innovation is not an act of God. It doesn't come like this. I don't know anybody, and I hope that you will agree with me, that wake up in the morning and say, hi, Des, I have the idea, I will create a company in this. But generally, it's a long process of maturation. And as you just said, Gina, a real look at where the market is going, and that's it. And this is what gives innovation light. So can you, if you can help me with this, what will you choose as the one or two big reason for success in innovation? Any domain. Somebody that I've not talked yet. Matthews, you want to speak or?
So I think.
But you have to unmute. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Unmute.
Okay. So I think the critical point on innovation is collaboration, literally. I mean, and making sure that that innovation has the market pull on one side and sort of spread the capability to be able to go out and spread that innovation across the region that is required for it. So Richard's point was very clear that you have to collaborate with the utilities, for example. You want to get these green molecules out. You want to get these things. The people who have the sort of reach and the spread are the utilities. So you can't treat them as the enemy. You have to work with them. So I mean, the point I was making earlier with that we have had 2 states out of 29 states and 7 union territories in India that have become retrograde. The other 27 states and the union territories are still very much progressing forward on what they need to do. But what needs to happen is, like Gina was saying, people get scared by what the news that you've had one state which has gone retrograde. So you need to be able to progress forward from that to be able to see the sort of bigger picture and take those sort of steps forward to facilitate that innovation going on forward. So I think that's the most important key to me, that don't get scared by seeing what is the sort of general picture. Try to delve more into what is the sort of actual, the nitty-gritty of what is happening. I mean, the scenario in India, in East Africa, is quite, it's a struggle. It's a struggle on a daily basis. But the only way we can get this forward is we keep on trying. And we are trying, we keep on trying. We can be very trying in some cases to the utilities who see us as their competition. But ultimately, I think they should realize that the innovation that is being brought in enables them to retire sort of polluting coal plants, get better at what they're doing, and they should progress forward into areas like demand management and so on and so forth. So I think that is, for me, innovation. It's that collaboration which allows the greater spread of technologies and other bits going on.
Good point. Another point? Oscar or Isaac?
Yeah, I will add to what Matthew was saying, that for me, innovation, I agree with collaboration, but I think it needs to be sustainable and create impact. I think that nowadays, talking about climate change, talking about energy transition, innovation needs to be focused on that, on creating an impact. It's no longer creating money, but it's creating impact and living a better world. I truly believe that will generate change in our world.
That's a good point. This is another way of looking at the market pool, and I probably fully agree with this. The purpose is taking over just the cash flow generation, which is not enough. It's necessary, but it's not enough. Yeah. Okay. Isaac, you wanted to say something?
Yes, sure. So Matthew actually took mine, so I'll
take the second one.
I'll take my second one. Yes.
Yes.
So this is not generally true, but in some cases, fine attention to detail can mean the difference between win and lose, make it or break it. And I'll give one example. I worked with one company, not in energy, but in pharmaceuticals, and they had an agreement with a collaborator who had a technology that they wanted to use. And so they drew up a contract. It was a very, very big contract, very detailed and complicated. And so years into the project, they had me review it. And I read it through, and I discovered something that they didn't know, which was that in the transfer of the technology, the other company had put into the contract that they will own all of the intellectual property that comes out of that research. And that when the intellectual property was finalized, they would give the company, the startup, this other company I was working with, they would give that company a license or an option to license the technology that they had just created. And so basically what they thought was this great transfer, and they would have this great product coming out of it, they didn't have that. Yeah. And so they would have been working for years and years, and at the end of the day, they had this massive restructuring and change that they had to go through because they had to pay for what they had just developed. So that was sort of hidden in a big complex contract, and I think that attention to detail just really killed that one.
Yeah. Okay. This is very close to what Gina insisted on. That the most difficult area for startup is to get the support in very specific domain, like the legal one, but also the fact that generally you have not so many resources that you can allocate to different subjects. And this is probably one of the danger. But I really like also what Richard said about the collaboration between utilities, grouping that could be helpful. And Gina, you want to comment on this?
No, I agree. Particularly this sector, you'd have to think, and Philippe, obviously with your background, you know that the technology owner type of companies, they're much less likely to collaborate. There are certain examples we see of industries coming under a lot of pressure, and they will, let's say, as almost an exception, start to collaborate. You see that with the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. You see that in the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. Those are, I
Yes.
would say, rather exceptions that we see. But I think on the utility side, because the utilities are typically not competing against each other, and they
Absolutely.
typically are not technology owners, right?
Yes.
They are
Right.
the perfect, in our minds, they are the perfect alliance partner for
Yeah.
the startups, right? And to the extent that you can bring together consortia of utilities who have a similar interest, then they can leverage off of each other's resources. And in the end of the day, we can accelerate the technology adoption, right? So I think that's what we're all, we often kind of say, it's a little bit cheeky, we say, sales solve everything, right? So if you have sales, it will be a reference for other clients. You'll get the money, you'll be able to hire your own resources, but how does a startup get those initial sales, right? And I think that, collaborating, getting a group of utilities who have a common interest to collaborate on the piloting will obviously accelerate the commercialization.
Yeah, this is a very good point. This come to a remark from Angela that said that listening to all of you, and congratulations for the quality of the talks, she said, listening to all of you, she thinks that we should create, and this is a direct message for Richard and Gina, we should create a special category in SET for dancing elephants. And the best collaborator or the best way for utilities to boost I think it's a good point that we have to think. I think nobody has done that yet, so we can create a dancing elephant criteria. So Richard, you wanted just to add something on this success story or point important for you, and then we do the final round of what is really important that you want to give to the posterity before we conclude the session. Please, Richard.
No, I think just working with startups, our experience has been that just as Gina has quite rightly pointed out, investing in startups is not our objective. If a startup needs help, they are better working with a venture capital group than working with a utility. Where utilities really bring value is in their industry expertise and their knowledge. And that's where we often find that with a startup, if they come to us with an idea, we can often look at that idea, and with our knowledge of our customers, our knowledge of the industry, we can give guidance and say, this is a great idea, but you need to think of it, applying it differently, or you need to combine it with something else. And that's really where the utilities bring value. Now, there has to be a quid pro quo in this. And generally, we would find that if we are working with a startup to make the startup successful, we would look for some return. So we might want to take a small equity investment at the start, or we might look for some favorable deal. Hopefully, when the startup is successful, that we can buy the product at a discounted price. But that's how we look at working with startups.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much. So now we are reaching the end, the last 5 minutes. So if you please like to give one idea, one statement on any subject related to innovation that we really think it's important for the success, either your company or the innovation question itself. So perhaps we can go in the same order as we started. So Robert left. So Isaac, can you give your testimony?
Sure. Through my IP clinic work, I've worked with almost 300 startups, and the one common feature I found is tenacity or grit is critical.
Yeah.
It's the hardest job in the world, actually, to build a startup. It's so much easier to go work for a company than to start your own. And so I have seen very many of them fail. Unfortunately, there's a stigma against failure in many places, including here. And so it's not like being in Silicon Valley where you know failure is almost a badge of
success. Yes.
Success, right? Exactly. It's not like that in many places. I appreciate that, but you have to put in. You have to be willing to take that risk and then just go until you can go no further. So
okay.
I encourage everyone who's trying. It's a hard road. Yeah.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Oscar.
So I just want to conclude with 3 points. The first one is, as a startup, we need governments to have simplicity in regulation to encourage and facilitate entrepreneurial activities.
Okay.
I think we need to have a compelling vision between government, big corporations, startups, and academia. That will be my second point.
Okay.
And the third one, we need to have a culture. There needs to be a startup culture created in the world. And what Isaac was saying regarding failure, that's a first starting point. Like failure, it's not something you need to be pointed out for failing. Go ahead.
No, please.
Okay, and that will be my third point, like having a culture around what needs to be done to have a startup, to create a startup, having networks, connected countries, connected cities, connected utilities, how Richard was saying. It's something that needs to be done with everyone, not independently.
And this is where WEC can continue to help and grow this kind of global connection and intersectorial connection. On the government side, I was really impressed by what Robert said in Sweden about the starting at school to open the mind of the child about the application of what they learn, and not only about what they learn. I thought this was, for me, a great advice. Matthew?
So mine would be about finance for the sort of renewable sector. I think my first wish would be that people leave their preconceptions at the door in regards to developing nations. It's a very vibrant, very fast moving situation, and I think people should understand that. And so, foreign direct investment is critical for this going on forward. Renewable energy investment is where it's most needed in developing countries, because what you're doing is you're retiring polluting assets and you are giving energy to people who actually need it. So you're not replacing something, you're creating new capacity. And that's especially true in India and in Africa. So I think that's what I would really like to sort of propose, that people understand that putting a little bit of finance into this actually and clearing the sort of cobwebs or clearing the sort of pathways to that is actually going to accelerate the growth of clean energy going forward. So that's my sort of.
Thank you, Matthews. And the perfect transition to Gina. He's talking about finance, Gina. And you?
Yeah, exactly. No, and I think, I appreciate what Matthew said. I think we need to take a very differentiated look at each geography, right? And what we need to do is identify where is the ecosystem not as healthy as it needs to be, and how we can correct that. And that will then, start the cycle, right? These things won't change overnight. But what we need to achieve at the end of the day is a professionalized entrepreneur venture, technology adopters from the large corporates, right? We need to create a system that is working much more efficiently, and that will attract the money. But it'll lead to standardization. Isaac mentioned about the challenges in certain geographies, just to get standard terms and conditions, right?
Yeah.
In certain geographies, this works really well. So let's learn from those geographies. Let's bring over those best practices, and let's try to strengthen the ecosystem where it's weak, instead of just saying, "Oh, this doesn't work, we're not going to be active here," right? And that's an appeal also to the venture capitalists out there as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Richard. To finish with the same metaphor, so where is the elephant in the room?
Well, maybe I'll bring this back to the bigger picture.
Yes.
And we're dealing with an enormous and very important challenge of addressing climate change. The energy system is very complex, very large, very fast moving, very dynamic. There is not going to be one great idea that solves the world's energy problems and addresses climate change. It's going to be thousands of great ideas that all come together, that all play a role and all contribute. So the healthier that we can have our innovation ecosystem, the easier it is for these ideas to come up, the stronger the collaboration between utilities and startups and between utilities around the world. All of that is going to help us deal with the world's biggest environmental problem.
Thank you. That was a great point. And so we have been quite efficient and have been able to bring this session to the end despite we start quite late, but this was great. And I really thank you a lot for all what you brought to the table. It was very rich. I took a lot of notes, and Angela, who was listening, we are creating already a new category for SEP with the elephant, the dancing elephant category. So this is absolutely great. And I wanted just to make another link with Angela, new and WEC, a new strategy about humanizing transition. You know, we have a lot of talk currently about the difference between innovation and progress. And I think this is all linked very well to what we have been talking around purpose. So innovation becomes progress when innovation has a purpose, which is in the line with the human needs. And I think this all fit very, very clearly to the strategy of WEG with humanizing transition and high category of innovation and startup. So I really thank you all for this. And I give the floor to, I don't know who now, this is the digital world, but so we just switch off. And thank you very much for your presence and your help in this fabulous task. Thank you. Take care. All take care. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And welcome back. And a huge thanks there to Philippe for that very interesting session, gathering all of the people there. Philippe Joubert really bringing us up to date with that startup workshop. And fascinating takeaways, I think, there when we look at it. Very, very important, obviously, the role of startups. This is, I think, accepted by everybody. But again, as we hear, it's not an easy concept. It's not an easy time to be a startup. You need a lot of grit and resilience, what we are hearing there, and indeed some great encouragement from many of the experts, the financiers, and all of the advisors there from the utilities as well. But again, what we're hearing to and from the startups saying they need better supporting policy coming from the governments. You know, we need to see a culture of entrepreneurship. We need to see this in our schools, in our universities, and indeed we need to see it in society. So I think that was very, very interesting as well too. Finance needs to be expanded without a doubt. I think that was one thing we were hearing from everybody, that it's not always accessible. It's not always there when you need it. And, you know, but at the same time, it is a good time to be a startup because I think everybody is embracing it. The bigger corporations in the energy space are certainly embracing it. They're looking for ideas. So all of that very important. But again, as we look around the world, the situation is not going to be the same everywhere. But indeed, maybe it's time to learn from what works in one area and see if it's transferable. But again, it's about bringing this match between corporates and startups, and that's where the win-win will be, making sure the role of venture capital is strengthened and actually delivers, is relevant and practical, because ultimately these are investors, you know, and they have an appetite for speed. Sometimes they want return on that investment, but also I think we heard there an appeal for patience, because it's not a fast turnaround. So sometimes, you know, we have to look at a reasonable time for that investment and how important it is. And again, maybe time to really, for startups to look out there for the venture capitalists and look out for the specialist investors. Who's interested in their space? Who's out there already doing various projects in this space, and they're the ones to get interested because they have the connections, they have often the funds, but at least they can, really help to make those introductions and hopefully bring good business together. Utility companies, great time for them to embrace technology and innovation. And again, maybe not the same in every country around the world, but it's beginning to happen. And again, I think that sentiment is there right across the industry. Startups, need to pay a lot of attention to detail. We found that went out too. And really, it's about finding the right partners, looking for the right advice, bringing the right people into place because they are there. There is interest, but maybe a little bit more effort there because without a doubt, the collaboration will help just about everybody and really help to create a healthier ecosystem. And even as Philippe just said there too, it's all about that innovation becomes progress. So it's all possible. And I just think it was a really encouraging discussion there. So really, really good.